I hear a compliment, and before gratitude can even arrive, something in me is already looking for the flaw, already building the case for why they're wrong, not consciously, not as a decision. The way breathing happens, the way blinking happens, just automatically. And I've done this my whole life. Someone says you're so capable, and something in me responds quietly, efficiently. They don't know the whole picture. Someone says you handled that really well, and something in me immediately locates the part I didn't handle well, holds it up, points to it, not because I'm being humble, because something that lives below the level of thought won't let the good thing land. And I've spent years wondering why. Why is it so much easier to believe the criticism than the praise? Why does the doubt arrive faster than the confidence? Why, no matter how much I accomplish, does something in me keep moving the finish line? If you know that feeling, and I think you do, stay with me. Because what I found when I started looking at this, honestly, wasn't what I expected. There is a neuroscientist named Michael Gazzaniga who spent decades studying something that most people never learn about their own minds. He worked with patients whose brain hemispheres had been surgically disconnected. In his experiments, he could send an instruction to one side of the brain without the other side knowing. The person would act on the instruction, stand up, walk across the room, and then Gazzaniga would ask, "Why did you do that?" And here is what happened every single time. The side of the brain that handles language, the side that tells stories, that explains things, that builds the narrative of who we are, had absolutely no idea why the person moved. But it didn't say that. It invented an explanation. Immediately, confidently, completely believable. I wanted to stretch my legs. I was going to get some water. And the person believed it completely. Not because they were lying. Because the brain created a story and accepted it as truth. Gazzaniga called this the interpreter. A system in your brain that is running constantly, generating explanations for everything you do, even when it has no idea what the real reason is. And here is what this means for you. Every time you act in a way that surprises you, every time you pull back from something you wanted, every time you undermine your own effort, every time you accept less than you could have, your brain has a story ready. I wasn't ready. The timing was wrong. I don't really want that anyway. I'm just like this. Almost never the real reason. Always a story. And the version of yourself you call your personality. The things you say when someone asks who you are, that too is, in large part, a story your brain wrote. Not a fact, not a fixed truth. A story. And stories, unlike facts, can be rewritten. Stay with me here. So where did the story come from? This is the question I kept circling for a long time. Because it didn't feel like a story. It felt like me. That I'm not ready. That I'm just not that kind of person. The quiet, efficient dismantling of anything that looked too much like possibility. It felt like self-awareness. Like honesty. Like someone who has a clear-eyed view of her own limitations. What I didn't understand was that I had confused familiarity with truth. And they are not the same thing. Researchers who study identity formation, how the sense of self is built over time, have documented something that is both uncomfortable and clarifying. The image you hold of yourself is not discovered. It is constructed layer by layer, from the feedback you received, from the conclusions you drew, from what was rewarded and what was punished, from what you were told, repeatedly, about what kind of person you are. And here is the part that changed something in me when I finally understood it. The brain doesn't distinguish between this is who I am and this is what I learned to be. To the brain, those feel identical. The woman who learned early that being too visible created problems. She doesn't experience that as a learned strategy. She experiences it as her personality, as introversion, as not being that type. The woman who learned that wanting too much led to disappointment. She doesn't experience that as self-protection. She experiences it as wisdom, as being realistic. The woman who learned that her voice created conflict, she doesn't experience that as a silencing. She experiences it as consideration, as not wanting to be difficult. In every case, the adaptation became identity. The strategy became character. And the character defended, explained, justified, became the thing she calls herself. Now, I want to ask you something. Not about what you do, about what happens in the moment before you do it. The last time you pulled back from something you genuinely wanted, what was the sensation that arrived first? Not the thought, not the reason, the sensation. Was it a tightening somewhere? A sudden sense of exposure? A flash of something that felt like danger even though nothing dangerous was happening? Because that sensation is not you. That sensation is older than the thought. It is the body carrying a lesson that the mind has wrapped in a story. And the story sounds like, I just don't do things like that. But what it is underneath is, I once learned that doing things like that was not safe. Stay with me. Here is what neuroscience confirms about identity and change. The brain is not static. It was once thought that after a certain age, the neural architecture was fixed. That the patterns were set. That personality was permanent. That is not what the research shows. What the research shows is that the brain rewires itself in response to what you repeatedly do and what you repeatedly believe about yourself. Every time you act from the old story, I'm not ready, I'm just like this, you lay down new architecture that supports the old story. Every time you act from a different story, a truer one, a less defended one, you lay down architecture that supports that instead. The brain learns from behavior, not from intention, not from wanting to be different, from doing differently. And this is where the self-sabotage lives, not in laziness, not in fear, exactly, but in the loyalty to a story that once made sense and still runs automatically even when it no longer serves anything. I used to think self-sabotage was about fear of failure, and sometimes it is. But what I've come to understand watching it in myself, sitting with it long enough to stop explaining it, is that often it isn't fear of failure at all. It's fear of having to update the story. Because if I try and I succeed, then the story that said I wasn't that kind of person was wrong. And if the story was wrong, what else was wrong? And if I've been living inside a story that wasn't true, what does that mean about the choices I made while I believed it? It is easier, in a very deep and very quiet way, to stay where the story puts me than to face what it would mean to outgrow it. But here's the thing about a story that runs you without your awareness. It doesn't feel like a story. It feels like reality. And reality, you don't question. You live inside it until something creates enough distance between you and the story that you can finally see it from the outside. Not to destroy it, not to punish yourself for having believed it, but to see it. Because a story, seen clearly, is already losing its grip. I'm not going to give you a way to fix this tonight because this isn't something that gets fixed. It's something that gets seen. And seeing takes time and patience and a willingness to be wrong about yourself in a way that doesn't collapse you. But there is one thing I want to leave you with. The next time you catch yourself saying, I'm just like this, before you let it close, ask it one thing. When did I first decide that? Not whether it's true. Not whether you should be different. Just, when did I first decide that this is who I am? Because somewhere in a moment, you may not be able to locate anymore, you made that decision. Or someone made it for you, and you accepted it and have been living inside it ever since. The version of you that exists beyond the story isn't somewhere you have to get to. She was there first. If this reached you in some way, stay close. Subscribe. We're in this together.